Hi, my name is John. I'm a tech lead on this project, which is called Dissent, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that project is in a minute. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about how we use cloud services to basically build what are essentially prototypes or products is probably a good way of thinking about it. So first of all, what is Dissent? So this is our beautiful team. So dissent stands for Decentralized Citizen Engagement Technologies. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit and try and explain a little bit more about what that is. So dissent is basically, it's probably best to think of it as a research program. It's funded by the European Commission through an enterprise charity called Nesta. And it's a consortium that's comprised of a few different types of organizations. So we're a technical partner in it, so we're building some of the technology. There are partners who are involved in standards such as W3. They're involved in trying to increase the use of open standards, such as things like OAuth, OpenID Connect, those sorts of standards. There are some partners who are the people who we're trialing these tools with. So these are sort of small NGOs or political organizations, that kind of thing. So for example, we're doing some user research in Spain in conjunction with Podemos, which is a political party in Spain. And we're also doing some user testing in Finland with Helsinki City Council. So these are the kinds of levels of organization that we're kind of testing with. So we've basically been tasked to build open source tools that these small organizations can use for democratic engagement. So those are things like voting or policy drafting or that kind of stuff. So just to kind of draw this diagram, just to kind of explain a little bit about what our sort of vision is for these tools. So I think the idea is basically that these small organizations can build platforms out of the kind of constituent pieces that they want. So as well as these tools being independently deployable, they should also be independently useful. So if you just want a single sign-on and you don't want any of the other bits, then you can just use our single sign-on tool and then integrate it with whichever sort of client applications that you have. Or if you just want the like the policy drafting bit, then you can just use that bit, and maybe you don't want to use our single sign-on, you could just use Twitter or something like that instead. And also there's an element of sort of federation to this. So if the green organization has a single sign-on which represents their user base, and the orange organization also has a single sign-on that represents their user base, then these organizations can kind of plug or share bits. So for example, the green organization here has a sort of voting application that they decide that they want to share with the sort of orange organization. And that's just a case of configuring their voting application to support that endpoint as well, that single sign-on endpoint. So those kind of things should be very easy and very flexible. So in terms of cloud services, or let me just skip to here. So in terms of using cloud services, we're basically we're not deploying to production. We're not hosting like a production system. The idea is that we build these products, these tools, and these other organizations can then use these at their leisure. So basically our task is to just deploy pilot versions of these tools so that people can use them, they can test them, and they can decide whether they want to use them. So it's kind of a shop window of sorts. So I'm just going to talk very quickly through a few different cloud services that we're getting benefits from, and just sort of recommend that you might want to do the same thing. So firstly, this is like a non-technical one, I guess, but Trello we find really, really useful for basically mapping out our work. We do a kind of lean sort of Kanban in our team, and Trello is really nice for this. I'm not going to talk a huge amount about it, but it's basically the core functionality is free. It's got a very nice interface. You can add sort of checklists and files and etc. to the cards, and we've had a lot of success with that. Also, we have to bear in mind that we ideally want open source contributors to our tools. I mean, they're all open source products, so using something like Trello, which is very easy to kind of add people to, or just to make completely public, means that open source contributors have a view to what we plan or what we have planned for these tools. Okay, so next, this is probably a bit of a moot point, but GitHub is the kind of de facto open source collaboration platform now. So it would be foolish for us not to be on Git. It's also, I'll talk a little bit more about a couple of other services that we're using which integrate very well with Git, so that makes it another very good choice for us. And also we're using it for other stuff apart from code as well, so we need to do some work in terms of collaborating on developing and iterating on open standards, or some definitions of schemas, that kind of thing, which aren't necessarily code, and we're finding it very useful for that too. Okay, so for continuous integration, we're using SnapCI, which I guess I should mention is a Thoughtworks product, but it's my favorite one. I think it's a really, really good tool that we've made. And this integrates really nicely with Git. So you basically just point Snap at one of your Git repositories, and it just starts building that repository. And then, so you can get up and running with Snap incredibly quickly, and have continuous integration, cloud-hosted continuous integration. It also can build pull requests, so that's good, obviously, from an open source contribution point of view, because people can get feedback against your test suite of how their pull request performs. There's support for a large range of technologies, so you can natively run tests in Ruby, Java, Python, etc. And also we use it, so we use Snap for our deployments as well. We do sort of continuous delivery as well as continuous integration. And for our deployments, for our automated deployments, we need somewhere to store our secrets, and we find that Snap at the moment, at least, is a very convenient place to do that. So Snap offers some functionality where you can add things like API keys or different secrets you need to store, and it encrypts those for you. So that's very, very useful. So next we need some places to store some of our artifacts. So we're using Clojure to build most of our tools. Clojure makes this really, really easy. You can pretty much do a sort of like a single command, push the new version of your library to Clojures. And the kind of libraries that we need to share at the moment are things like client libraries, particularly for integrating with our single sign-on, that kind of stuff. So if people want to write a tool in Clojure which integrates with that, then they have a library that they can already use. We're in the kind of very early stages of adopting Docker a little bit more. And Docker Hub is also a very nice kind of artifact repository. And a Docker container can kind of think of it like a runnable almost. If we can put our application inside a Docker container and then use this as a sort of delivery mechanism for our application. So if someone wants to use our application, it's pretty much a case of, it's a very sort of Git-like interface. So you can do something like Docker pull the name of the application, and you have it inside a container that has all the dependencies it needs. So we're thinking, we haven't got very far with this yet, but we're thinking this is going to be quite a nice route to essentially providing what would be the equivalent of a kind of runnable. Right, so in terms of hosting, so we tend to use Heroku just for the very sort of early stages. And that's because it does have a free tier, which is great, but it's quite restrictive. So Heroku uses these kind of containers that they call dynos for sort of spinning up your web processes. And basically in the free tier, when they go to sleep, then your next request that gets served will take quite a while to get a response back, so that's not ideal. Also, they now have a restriction where you can only have 18 hours out of 24 uptime. So from a prototyping point of view, that's okay. But obviously, when we get to a point of view where we want people using it more consistently, then that's not really good enough. Having said that, Heroku integrates really, really nicely with Snap as well. So you can create your Git repository, hook it up to SnapCI, and have it deploying to Heroku in a matter of, pretty much minutes. It's very, very slick to set up. So that's also very, very beneficial. So I should justify why we're not using Heroku when we decide that we do want better uptime, and we just found that it's quite expensive to scale. So at that point, we've decided to use DigitalOcean, which I'll talk about now. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, there are also some, like another advantage of Heroku, at least from the prototyping point of view, is if you want to have a sort of free hosted instance of a database without having to deploy something, then there are quite a few options for that as well. So you have a cloud-hosted Mongo instance or SQLite instance, that kind of thing. So once we've decided that we want to kind of invest a little bit more in our prototype, or when we want to kind of pilot these things properly and have a sort of demonstration version which has a decent amount of sort of uptime, we've been using DigitalOcean. And the cheapest droplets we find are pretty much sufficient for our needs at the moment. We don't have a great deal of a number of users. And they come in about $5 a month. But it's also quite nice that it's pay as you go. So although it's $5 a month, if you just spin one up for a few hours, you'll just get paid for those few hours when you tear it down again. So that's very handy. Also, when you do decide you want to scale a little bit more, you can scale your droplets to have increased memory, increased resources, without having to lose all the data in that droplet. And the documentation is really great for DigitalOcean, and it also has a large range of base images for different operating systems. Well, obviously, it's probably worth saying at this point that you will need you probably want some kind of level of automation in your in infrastructure code. We're using Ansible at the moment to make this work, so you don't get any of the kind of dependency stuff that something like Heroku gives you. So you will need to kind of manage that yourself. So having repeatable provisioning makes this much easier. But I think some of the other guys are going to talk about the infrastructure side of things a little bit more. All right, and finally, we have some requirements to send emails. So on our single sign-on, we have to, for example, send email confirmation emails, or forgotten password resets, that kind of stuff. And we've been using Mailgun for this, and again, Mailgun has a free tier, and this has also been great. So the free tier provides you with 10,000 free emails per month, which again, for our kind of demonstration purposes, is more than sufficient, at least for the time being. The API is really nice to use. I mean, it's just a kind of JSON post where you just specify a to or from a subject, etc. It does have a limited number of domains that you can verify. So on the Mailgun kind of interface, you sort of register, you have like a domain that your email is coming from. So you can have 5 of those on the free tier. But again, that's plenty for our needs at the moment. And the reporting dashboard that it has is really nice, and will give you kind of statuses on all of the emails that it's tried to send. When you do want to scale Mailgun, it basically, once you get beyond 10,000 emails a month, then it starts charging you per email. That works out, so if for instance you were to send about 1 million emails a month, which I should say is like far outstrips what we need at the moment, but if that were the case, then it works out a few $100s per month. But it looks like it probably would be quite a good option if you wanted to use this as a sort of enterprise or cloud hosting solution for dealing with your email as well. Right, and that's so my conclusion is basically if you're on a low budget, and to be honest, we've been almost kind of self-imposing a low budget on ourselves, because we have to bear in mind that we expect that the small organizations that will be deploying some of these tools, we're going to have very limited resources to spend on IT infrastructure, and also they're going to have probably limited staffing or IT kind of expertise for this. So those kind of constraints mean that we've been focused very much on doing things for free as much as possible. So if you are on a low budget, then basically the thrust of my argument is that there's a lot of good free services that you can use before you even need to start thinking about paying for things. So the only thing that we're paying for at the moment is DigitalOcean, and we're already in a situation where we have some fairly, some apps with some decent uptime, and like really good placeholders for conversations, and good for doing getting user feedback, which we're doing in a few different pilot countries. And also keeping things open source is really, really beneficial as well in terms of keeping things cheap. So things like SnapCI and Git are much cheaper or they're free basically when you're doing open source, which is really advantageous. And also open source obviously comes with other benefits as well, such as basically getting contributions from the open source community, as well as people knowing a bit more about who you are and what you're doing. I guess there are also some free options, I think, if you do need some private repositories. I think Bitbucket gives you a limited amount of private repositories. That might be something you want to consider. But anyway, yeah, there's lots of free stuff that you can use, and go open source. Thank you very much.